Okay, so thank you for coming once again. I'm going to introduce how this came about, the topic. Basically, it was nothing more than student frustration and the state of being broke and wanting to go on the road and not being able to, obviously. Me and Sean usually have a lot of rooftop conversations, we like to call them, where we just vent each other and basically we wanted to find something better here in Malta, and we were frustrated that everything was sort of not interesting and trying to get away from all the stress and had nothing to nothing interesting to see. So I approached Sean about the topic, and then we started evolving it and discussing it via email mostly. So yeah, that's. And now we've prepared a few slides, and we have 4 interesting people who talk to.
Good evening. So when Elaine asked me to help her preparing this talk, I definitely wanted to avoid having another architects event for architects and by architects. So tonight, amongst the panel, we have 2 non-architects and 2 architects who work a lot with non-architects. And another thing which was very relevant to me is that these people are all very busy, very active on several fronts. So I'm only going to focus in a short introduction on the main current activities, professional activities, and also we're not going to make a whole sum of what they do. So we have Elise Pisani, who is an anthropologist. She's also a lecturer, and she's also part of Transit. That's a group who's doing a study about the changes that occur in the area of the city gate whilst the project is ongoing. Definitely worth having a look on the website. Then there's David Felice, who's an architect and director at Architecture Projects, but he's also the the chairman of Valletta 2018 Foundation. That's a foundation that manages Valletta's bid to become European Capital for Culture in 2018. Then we have Alexei Dingli, the mayor of Valletta, but also a lecturer here at university in the Department of Artificial Intelligence. And last but not least, with Adrian Mamo, architect and director of Architect Studio and chairman of the Malta Council for Culture and Arts. That's a council that implements the national cultural policy. To start this kind of talk and to introduce the first topic, which is about designers' enthusiasm, we want to refer to Charles Eames and something he had brought forward in the late 60s. He says that design depends largely on constraints, and that one of the few effective pieces of design problem is the ability of designers to recognize as many of the constraints as possible and her or his willingness and enthusiasm for working within these constraints. So I want to ask the panel first, if they can identify some of the major constraints that they think this younger generation of architects will have to find enthusiasm for over the coming years. I'll pass on the microphone and then we'll see.
So you want to start with me? I think finding enthusiasm is something which is not something that architects face. It's something that everybody faces, and I think you're expected to find enthusiasm in life. And I think it's really like a fish who's swimming in the ocean, and he's trying to find the ocean, and he's swimming in the sea, and he's trying to find the ocean, but you can't see it because it's everywhere. And I think it's a matter of being aware where you are, what you're doing, and that's what really gives you the enthusiasm. I think if we take the local situation, we're all swimming in the same sea. And, it's easy to lose enthusiasm, lose your swimming skills until you really appreciate where you are. So there are, you can be creative, you can be enthusiastic, and you cannot. Sometimes it depends on the environment you're in. ask Chris Griffith, why is he enthusiastic? Because he lives in the same environment as maybe another architect, you know. So I think it starts from understanding and yourself and your environment and what you want to do with that.
And to identify those constraints, if you manage to,
if there would be any specific constraints you could come up with that you think the young generation will deal with, apart from the enthusiasm.
Well, I think if we start with the constraints, we will meet this evening and another evening and we won't finish. But I think the biggest constraints which architects face, or as anyone face, is really the limit they impose on themselves. I think that's the only and biggest constraints you'll ever face. If you have a look at my children, which are normal children as any other children, they're very enthusiastic about everything. Even just, I don't know, a leaf on the floor, they're enthusiastic about the sleeve. Anything, they're enthusiastic about anything because they're discovering the world. But then I think we're raised in an educational system which suppresses our enthusiasm. We have to go to this mold, and unless we fall into this mold, then we're not fit for our educational system. So I think the process of going to the educational system, and since you're here, probably you've passed successfully through that educational system, then you probably fall in that mold, and probably your enthusiasm is a little bit suppressed by the system. When you go outside of university, you probably face yourself with a lot of more problems, which will further help to suppress this enthusiasm. So I think it's something you have to look inside yourself. I think there's a lot of opportunity, but it's up to you to believe in that opportunity. It happens a lot as well in my field, which is the software field. You find people, you meet people whereby they have no idea of what they want, and when they acquire software, they want a software like the current system. Then you find others where they dream, and they dream a lot. I think you should guide them a little bit in the middle, whereby you're giving them the dreams, you're going outside of the box, find your enthusiasm, but obviously guide them to always be grounded on the floor.
I guess constraints or maybe parameters. First of all, I think it's a positive term. I would reach solve it by saying it's necessarily a negative. And it's that which fixes the boundaries within which we work and all think. And I guess as architects, or people interested in architecture, where we come from, I think the regenerative process, which for a reasonably long period of time, 20, 30, 40 years, which is your that post-independence identity, which has been very much, I call it a building blend. A form of regeneration. It's a bit strange. It's mainly about producing buildings. And I think that's probably the thing we've been most concerned with in society for the good and the bad over the past few years. I remember a few years ago, actually, while Tom was talking, it reminded me of Anthropology, what people call the challenge, which is the Chamber of Architects on the shoot. I remember when we had launched it, we had to use the phrase intentionally, if you want, in saying that we need to recognize that it's never going to be the same thing, that process is coming to an end. And I think we read this about 2007, 2008. I think accidentally it might have been a little bit prophetic. No? So I guess now it becomes a question of if regeneration, in the wide sense of the word, is a continuous process. What is it about in the future? And we as architects, if you want, armed as we are by the process in which we have learned and absorbed, what becomes our role? And that's very much a shifting of these parameters, because I think the step really is to begin to understand that, okay, it's not going to be about putting up new buildings, But I leave the question for now.
Good evening as well. I'm not an architect, I'm an anthropologist, so I will also be looking in the same way. What I would like to say when I hear your question about constraint and the new problems of parameters worldwide, I think the major shift is that most of the world population now lives in cities. Whereas before people were living in villages and small communities where people had a sense of community there. Personal identity was very different. Now we live in big cities and we're going more and more to live in very big cities. And cities are definitely full of strangers. So as an anthropologist, I would say, yeah, the new framework to work with is how are we going to live with strangers? How architects can help to, for example, make this distinction between private and public space. It's very important for public life, because as an anthropologist, again, I'm interested in how we live together. So I would say, the main focus would be how are we going to be happily in a peaceful society, which will have some conflict, of course, but how can we live together in huge, dense urban environments? So that's how I would say. We're moving on to the next topic now, and the image shows people rebuilding a school which has been destroyed after a storm in Nepal. This is Grassroots Academy, and I have put it here precisely because of this quote, which says that only 5% of the approximately 1 billion buildings worldwide are designed by professional architects. Hence, one could conclude that the other 95% is not architecture. Of the 5% that could be called architecture because it is designed by professionals, only a fraction reflects anything beyond practical and pragmatic intentions. And therefore, it is this minority that is usually the subject of architecture history and architecture criticism, which is what we are usually exposed to online and what most of the students follow and most of architects follow. And yes, we do spend a lot of time going through these websites and seeing which is the nicer building and which is the better planned one and whatever. So I want to ask the architects here on the panel tonight, Adrian and David, as well as you, the students, how many of us actually take time to understand what architecture is beyond what we see in media? And is there a tendency, obviously, especially amongst university students, to copy-paste or just do the exercise? And how many architects realize this as well? Do we get caught up in the market? Do we think back to the basics, to what is really needed in an environment?
I would actually question the influence of it. Conclusion of that seems to be that you have to have architecture produce architecture, which is not the case. I mean, maybe say in the obvious, I don't think Corbusier was an architect, I don't think Michelangelo was an architect, I don't think Riscon was an architect, technically, if you put it on this. So a lot of architecture has always been produced by non-architects. It's a privilege as architects we have to do architecture. But not just our privilege, I would say. And there's a lot of architecture which is, if you want, of the nondescript type, which is done by architects. What's interesting in quotes, remember that was question, that's from the observer, or from was a real question of the architecture media or media and architecture. I think, I don't know whether it's the same as you, but certainly it was we sometimes think that the media concerns us as the architectural media. And it used to take me a long time, I remember, to realize how insular, how small that was. I remember finding out one day that the circulation of architecture review was 23,000, and I think it's a bit less now. That's something we got its own at the moment of the day, and that's your global architecture magazine, which you think everybody's looking at, and you really want to get into that, because when you get to God knows what type of project, it's really untrue now. It's not very right at all. The last person to read the architecture review is probably that client in my own work. I remember Red Bull has did this. I think he was the first. My memory is what he used to do, but I think he was the first architect who was on the cover of, at the time, The Economist, I think The Economist. And he had made this challenge with the architecture establishment really hadn't liked. He was saying, the architecture we do, or the high flow discussion we like to have about architecture is of no interest at all unless it's on mainstream media. And I think he was the first one in a very long time that I've done this.
I'd just like to bring up another point that Elaine mentioned about the glamour in architecture. I think this is, there is a point of saying, yeah, this is pure, show, and this is what is real, the real stuff about architecture. I have a theory that when magazines started being published, and all the you get all the pictures of the furniture companies, and the furniture companies would put the sofa, and then in the background there would be a wall, and a staircase, they'd all set it all up. So people started getting the impression that this is what architecture is all about. And therefore, most of people started designing houses which look like furniture shops. And that's one side of the, the glamour side of architecture, which I think gives a wrong impression. But when you have to deal with a client and you're discussing, you do get the impression that some people, have been influenced by this glamorous image. I've had clients who say, yes, and I want this like this, and then I want in here, I want this, and I want this, because they've got these illusions of grandeur about what, their own little castle should look like. Obviously, at the bottom of it all, your duty as an architect is to make sure that you filter all this away and at least deliver the genuine stuff. It's also like the mentality of, if you're in, for example, in music, somehow there's the idea that, if you don't make it to have a record label and get into certain class of recording or Eurovision or whatever, then you're not as good. Whereas if you appreciate alternative music, you would understand that that's the glamour side, and really making music is somewhere else. And I think that's part of our job, to sift what is really important and not. Sometimes the important things are the very small things. I still learn all the time, the difference between 50 centimeters and 60 centimeters, what difference, or having a level on 3 steps difference or 5 steps difference. That's something which forms, I think, the architecture, the spaces in which we live in, which you don't get from a photo on a magazine.
Thank you. If at any given point in time somebody would have a question, just raise your hand and we'll storm at you with the microphone. The next one is another aspect of the extraordinary, ordinary, which I would directly ask Elise. In the same Architecture Observer, there was this little piece of writing which says that architectural critics and historians are interested in the extraordinary, anthropologists in the ordinary. They would argue that one could say that the interest of the architectural discipline ends at the point where anthropologists enter the scene. That architects are obsessed with the outcome of the process, a design, a project, a building, whereas how a piece of architecture is perceived, used, appropriated, changed, experienced, and remembered to sell and take into account. Of course, such a statement is very polarized, but would you generally agree with such a position? And are there any means you can identify to bridge that gap and can lead to new opportunities?
So should we bridge the gap? Of course we should. But we should, because I think we have very different knowledge, very different perspective. But yet if we could meet and chat and analyze the project together before it is built, so in the process of the creative process of designing a building, if we could, anthropologists and architects, meet, I'm sure we would make better buildings. Why? Because, as you said, I guess the architects are more educated and trained to think about the objects. So as engineers, but also as artists, they're looking for the beauty of the object, for example. Whereas the anthropologist is much more interested into the uses of the building, how people are going to live in this building, what people are going to make out of this building. It's often very interesting to see how buildings or street furniture, like benches, for example, how they are taken over with very different uses, very different meanings. For example, skateboarders, people who use skateboards, how they interact with the streets, with the buildings as well. So yes, we should definitely bridge the gap. However, it's very difficult. One thing I think is why it's so difficult is because we don't read the same books. Sometimes we do find common background to understand each other, but many times when I speak with architects, it's like we're not speaking about the same thing. Because anthropologists might be more into actually the empty space between the buildings, like the streets, or even the void, the empty space in the room. That's what interests us. And also, as you were saying, the observer, the architecture observer, we are interested about what happened after the architect moved out. So yeah, I would say it's very difficult. But again, it could be so fruitful, it could be so nice. Because, for example, I'm thinking of this very nice book that I heard you might have read, which is In Praise of Shadows. That might be a book that could, make a bridge between anthropologists and architects. And in this book, you see how the old traditional Japanese aesthetic was built not so much upon light as we are today. Today it's all about big windows, light everywhere, transparency, and all that. But in other countries and other times, shadow, shade, obscurity was looked for, was praised. So the anthropologists can help by kind of understanding vernacular architecture, by understanding how people live, what people need, what are their values, so that we can create buildings which are also more linked to society. Because it seems to me that many of those fantastic, big, very aesthetic buildings are becoming more and more all the same everywhere. You take Dubai, It's like the archetype of non-vernacular architecture. And even in Malta, it seems as all the buildings, even aesthetic, very designed buildings, are looking all the same. So maybe anthropologists working with architects could help in this way. To be also more creative, I think.
So I have a question. Do you agree or disagree?
Would you consider Jane Jacobs a possible bridge with urban design and anthropology? Jane Jacobs.
No, Jane Jacobs, of course.
So how many of you have read, how it's called? The Life and Death of Great American Cities? The famous book of Jane Jacobs. Jane Jacobs is not an anthropologist, but she is really used by anthropologists. An anthropologist, I would say, who is really central is, for the old time, is George Simmel, German philosopher. And more recently, you have someone like Richard Sennett. Richard Sennett is really highly influenced by Jane Jacobs' work. Jane Jacobs was more of a journalist and a militant in New York, and she really tried to fight the zoning of New York, and that's something anthropologists have really worked on. This idea of separating the city between, the business center, then you have the shopping center, then you have the dormitory suburbs. And her big assessment is that by dividing space in the city, we divide people, meaning that if you had a neighborhood where there would be work, shopping, leisure, and lodging, then many different people will come together in the street. Diversity in the big cities is a very big issue in urban anthropology. And we can only foster this diversity of people by having a diversity in buildings and diversity in functions. So buildings that allow multiple functions, buildings that are not only like a big bank, or even a neighborhood where there is only banks, and so completely empty at night. But a neighborhood where there will be a small, a little like Malta. Actually, Malta is quite a paradise for urban anthropology because it's like, for many people, it's so diverse. That's the great part of it. You have small shops, small banks, people are still living. Take Valletta, it's a very good example. And many different people meet. And that's very important for a sense of society, living with strangers. Very important.
Valletta doesn't have a problem at night, and then which kind of defies the anthropology, where at night it dies, and it's...
Yeah, that has been discussed by many people in the street as a hot topic, yeah. I think we'll come here. Yeah. I'll just say a small word just before. I think Valletta, first of all, I think Valletta is changing. I think slowly bars are open at night. And if you live in Valletta, you really feel that, the city is changing and maybe for the better. We'll see. We don't know yet.
Does it have a problem?
It's just the contrast between day and population during the day.
It's what everyone says, no? But is it true?
It is. I've seen it.
I live there and I actually love it, the contrast.
So I think it's about what we want, Valletta to be. I mean, I don't want Valletta to become a new Archibabble, definitely. Alright, I think Valletta is catering for a different kind of audiences. Personally, I have to sign most of the permits which we give out in Valletta, and I can assure you that Valletta is a very busy place. It doesn't mean that it's flowing with people each and every day, because it isn't. However, if you look in Valletta, I mean, I calculate about 30 weekends a year. Sorry, we have some sort of activity in the squares or outside of Valletta, apart from that, we have also 5 theatres, which normally are not counted as being active in Valletta for some strange reason, even though they're very much active throughout the year. So activity happens in Valletta, maybe not as much as during the days, and that's mainly as well because of the shops. I mean, there's the chicken and egg situation, the shops won't open because there are no people won't come because the shops are closed. Okay? Apart from that, we like a little bit with regards to synergies. For example, it's a known fact, there was a survey last year that after the shows at the Mamo or any other theatre in Valletta, people don't find where to go. I mean, all the shops are closed. So I think it's a little bit a change in mentality. And that is one of the things we're trying to work even in Valletta 2018. Personally, I think that's one of our goals for 2018 to see Valletta maybe more alive than it is today. However, I would disagree when you say that Valletta dies in the evening. Maybe it's not bubbly with activity as it is in the morning, and that's a known fact. However, as it was pointed out, I mean, there are a lot of activities, a lot of restaurants, a lot of theatres in Valletta which are full of people. So I think it's a different kind of audience which we have.
You know what I find sad about there's lots of business and lots of commercial units and shops and offices, but the residents in Valletta seem to be either government residents or as one-off people who are starting to move in maybe now. Maybe now the problem is starting to disappear, or maybe now it's starting to change. But before it used to be shops, business, government housing, and that's it. No mix of residents and houses.
It's still like it. and there's nothing wrong with social housing as well.
No.
All right?
I'm not saying
No, because you said it's said. I don't think it's said.
What's sad is that the pockets of life are where the social housing are. In the Market Street, there's no residence, there's no grand palace where the Duke of Malta lives or something like that. You know, there's no kind of, I don't know, like the past where it used to be a city built for gentlemen. There's no
compare with the past. I mean, in the past there was only Valletta, so obviously people flock to Valletta. Now we have a choice. And I think that's where we should compete. We should compete with places outside of Valletta and get people inside Valletta. With regards to the social housing, one of the things... No, but let me explain. One of the things which, for example, happened last summer is we organized a summer school for children in Valletta. And we realized that some of the parents of these children never really visited any museum in Valletta. Alright? In fact, some of them didn't even know that there are these museums in Valletta. Okay? So I think it's more, we should work with these people towards making them appreciate what we have. And sometimes something which happens to me as well is, I think, take it for granted, all the nice things we have in Valletta. So one of the things we're doing is we're working out with the community, and in fact that is also one of our targets in 2018. Unless we involve the community and make it appreciate what we have in Valletta, then obviously we would have failed, in my personal opinion. However, it's an opportunity, and that's how I see it. Sort of, we have these people, and we have to bring them closer to culture. And I think that's what we're trying to do.
I think maybe beyond the layer of discussion of whether it's alive or dead. One thing which I don't know how obvious this is, but I think it's a script has a lot of intention. I think there's an enormous difference between the Valletta, which is on the periphery, and the left-hand part. I think that's where it sort of stems from. Whether it's social housing or not. The itself. Somebody once told me that that's probably the most important piece of heritage about the city that everybody thinks about themselves. I think it's enormous distance from the Valletta, which is just 100 meters off the road. I mean, it's quite incredible how it is up. So it's funny, not what Valletta is city today, and with its size, population, all that. But if I can, recently we had this exercise with the Valletta community in itself, you know, where you all was, I mean, looking back, maybe snobbishly, arrogantly, you know, talk about the idea of culture, of the capital of culture, what it could be. And you're talking about it with people who are hardcore community, okay? Really hardcore community. Not a very big group, but probably a group of people. You have to wipe them out, you know, from homeland and that group of a meeting. Really, the essence of Valletta would die out. We talk of people from carnival, from football, from schools, from the band, where we have people around the city really takes. And I remember at one point, which is actually sort of say the story, one of the persons leading this was very academic almost, telling them, sort of, we're coming to the end of this meeting, and we really used to, we can extract, you know, 5 things which could be really good to do with that of culture, 5 goals that we can achieve. If you had the choice, you know, if that from the point of view, here I am giving you the choice, you know, what would you do that would really, you know, could really change the city for you? Now one guy, moved like nervously, sat on the edge of his seat, and said, I'm saying in English, I guess, so I thought much better than what he obviously. He said, I'll tell you 5 things. He said, I want affordable housing. I would need to know that if I'm going to move, that I can afford to buy a house in my city. Because it's my city, I don't care. And I need to know that I can buy it. Said, actually pointed at one of us and said, because the reality is, you know, you get an architect who has graduated, and he buys a flat, which he uses for once a fortnight, and because of the way it's impacting the price of property, I can't buy it more. So I have $100 to go and live in the good area. He said, secondly, he said, I need to know that then when I have kids, I can send them to a safe school. Because I'm not so sure how this is, but his point was, I don't think my school is safe yet, you know. He said, thirdly, I need to know that after school, when I want to take my kids out to a garden, I can do it. He said, I can't do it like that, because we've lived in all the public spaces. There's hardly anything else. I really need to go, some of them are dangerous as well, you know. And I wouldn't want to take my kids there, and I have to again go off about it. And I need to know that if I come home in the evening, I can park. And I can get myself out of my car, and if I'm visiting my grandma, that I can unload the gas cylinder and take out some area and take it out. He said, you know what? He said, sort out those 5 things for us, and then we talk about budget. And frankly, I know I agree with what you were saying before, which I think is a distinction about, I don't know, it sounds like a really stupid question, but the way our country has evolved over the last 70 years, do we now live in a city as opposed to small city, as opposed to living in tight-knit communities or villages? Does that mean anything at all? Is it just an academic question? Who cares? Or is it really changing the way we live? You know, I remember at one point in Anthropology, we had 2 maps. You know, not very old map, but mid-70s compared to now. And you notice the distinction lost between one locality and another. So if you want a negative, a mirror of the scale of development that happened in the last 30 years. But frankly, then taking it as it is, in reality, you know, if you want. Remember we looked at one town, Pembroke, Shire, Valletta, and those 3 villages. And we realized the population of 280,000. So, what is it like? Small city. Does that mean anything? I really don't know. I'm not an anthropologist.
Anthropologists don't have answers, they have questions. Architects might do that. So what is the question?
if it's different living in a city than it is living in a village, have we, in a very short period of time, gone through this transition of moving from living in a village to living in a city?
Okay, so first, yes, living in a city and living in a village is completely different. It has been academically theorized, like you have the Gamerschaft and the Gesellschaft. So, the interesting thing is that when you live in a village, you know everyone. Okay? And your identity, your individual identity is known by everyone. You get a nickname, you know, all the time, in fact. When you live in a big city, for example, Berlin or Shanghai or those huge cities, you can get quite lonely because nobody knows your face in the street. You can spend days, you can spend weeks and months without meeting anyone that would at least represent your face. You know, I don't know, the baker, no one knows you. But at the same time, the nice thing about living in the city is that you can break up the norms much easier. You know, I always take the example of homosexuality usually is more tolerated in big cities. You can dress up, you know, how you want, nobody cares. Think about New York, for example, people really have fun. So yes, it is different. Then what about Malta? I think there is still a very tightly knit sense of community in Malta. People are still, and when you meet someone, you always ask, where are you coming from? What's your village? And this defines you very much. You're from Sierra, you're from Yakakaram, you're from Safi, you're from the Leha, truly, people will categorize you from where you are. So in this sense, yes, we are still living in a community. But then if you take the case of Valletta, and this doesn't happen just now, it's also, I think, happened many centuries ago. The fact that it's a harbor, the fact that so many strangers are coming, so many faces that we do not know, so many tourists, you know, just one day tourist from the cruise liners, makes it like a bustling big city. So I actually think it's a very interesting case to study from afar, also from inside, because it's in between. And I think we should really keep this in mind and try to preserve it, not by putting it in a glass box, like in a museum, but by being aware that, yeah, Malta and Valletta especially is so much a unique case.
If I made a few things. First of all, I think or rather a lot of people from Valletta have this artistic trait, and you'll probably notice it in specific events such as Carnival or next month where we will be winning the league. So you can see our celebrations. But it's true, I mean, even with children we notice that they're very much inclined towards the artistic side rather than the academic side. So I think that's a good culture which we'll probably try to make. Apart from that, with regards to what Elise was saying, in fact, statistically, and I'm sure you've probably seen the news, and on quite a number of negative news, you tend to hear that this particular criminal was from Valletta, blah, 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 blah. Alright? But statistically, when someone goes out of prison, statistically they go and live in Valletta. Now, I don't know if you've ever studied this, Elise, no. But it's a known statistic, and it's quite curious. Probably one of the reasons is precisely because in Valletta maybe it's something more tolerated since it's a city or something else. I had another point, but I forgot it.
I have a small question to maybe wrap up this discussion. What you were saying before about how anthropologists obviously should work more with architects. Do you think we should take it as far as to say that anthropologists should be on the design team when the architects are actually coming up with the core of what they want to shape the design?
Yes, I wish. Yeah, why not? Because as I tried to explain briefly before, I think it would provide, it would foster a really interesting discussion. It would be very creative, not only for architects but also for anthropologists, because anthropologists are usually, how can I say, studying what's already happening, and not what I love about architects and architecture is that you're looking forwards, whilst anthropologists are usually looking at the present, at now, what's happening, and what happened before. But not so much, we're not so much trying to give solutions, trying to provide solutions. So it will also help a lot of anthropologists to be a bit more creative, maybe.
And does anyone have a question?
And I believe the theme of this evening was, if I'm not mistaken, the quality of architecture in Valletta. Or the quality, no?
No, like opportunities or barriers for quality in architecture / in Malta.
Opportunities?
Parameters and opportunities for quality architecture in Malta.
Then I get it wrong. Now, what is interesting that the 4 or the 5 points that David mentioned is that both David and Alexei, if I'm not mistaken, are born and bred in Valletta, but they choose not to live in Valletta anymore. Now, probably they will tell us it's the wives. But it's quite an interesting point. And maybe if you ask the wives, perhaps they probably mention the same thing. I don't know. But no, what I'm trying to say is that what is the quality? Is the quality of life and the quality of architecture. When I say architecture, I'm not saying all the buildings that they look nice or that they're nicely installed, or that there are no wires from the cable joining into the streets after you go through all the hassle of removing all the cables of an mortar, and then all of a sudden the cable and go come and do the wires. Now I'm talking about the actual spaces where you live in, be it a garden, be it the steps in the street behind you, or be it restoring your facade. Today I bumped into Alexei and he told me, you removed the chops of St. Dominic from the facade which you were restoring, and I said yes, because it was on our facade and it was made of aluminium, of gold aluminium, and it was even leaking the aluminium inside the facade, and I said, and we have to remove it so that our restoration team can actually clean up the stone. And he told me, well, they would like to put it up again. And I said, yes, no problem. If we make it maybe out of wood, no? Maybe in line with the mayor, so I have nothing against gold aluminium, really, but we will do it. And the interesting thing is that the guy next door who actually put an niche of St. Dominic on my facade, actually wants to put the niche back again. Now, I don't know if it's just a measure of putting St. Dominic on every corner to kind of mark the territory of where it's St. Dominic, but I don't know exactly how it works. But it must have to do something with the pride of living in Valletta and the pride of having St. Dominic adorning your facade. And my question to the panel is basically this. What do you think should we do as well as 2018 or the local council or for Valletta to be recognized as a place where people are actually proud to be from Valletta, I'm from Birgo. If you go, if anyone has been in Birgo recently, you will see it's probably one of the little localities, or little villages where if you go there, you really see the pride of the people living there. Every single facade is kept clean. So it's stylish or not, it's another story. Or the port outside is nice. But there is a certain pride which you feel. As soon as you go into Birgo, you feel a certain sense of pride and cleanliness and all that, which perhaps Valletta still lacks. Is that because it's a city, or you are saying maybe you define it as a city? Because I don't think it's only that, personally, but this is what I'm trying to ask. Is it because people don't feel that they belong there? Is it because people maybe are not from Valletta? What can one do in your separate positions to make this feeling of the architecture or the life quality or the general, let's say, not only aesthetic, but general feeling of being in Valletta as a place where it makes you feel happy walking there?
I beg to differ with this, but I can assure that people are very proud to be from Valletta. So even maybe they don't show it in these things, and I agree with you there, but people are very proud. And one of the point I wanted to make, which I forgot, is that I meet a lot of people even from outside of Valletta, and they try to find this link with the city. And I don't know how to describe it. Maybe it's an extended Valletta, or I don't know the correct term. But a lot of people, when we speak, they tell me, because my grandfather was from Valletta, my CEO was from Valletta, so on and so forth. So I think that there's this national thing where a lot of people try to find the linkage with Valletta, and I think they should love it. Now, one of the problems with the people living inside Valletta, especially those in the social housing, is that there was a period, without going into politics obviously, where they were practically planted into the city. And most of them are not from Valletta, and I think that broke the social fiber of the city. Now obviously we're in the second generation where the situation is becoming different. You know, the children are raised in Valletta, they go to the Valletta nursery. So once again, this is being grown, but I think it will take time. It won't happen overnight. We do quite a lot of work with the social housing in the different areas, and you realize that these are people that take care of their property, but not of the common areas, which is quite strange when you think that you have to live there on a daily basis. And as I said, I think it's one of this problem of non-belonging. Some of them, or a good number of them, don't feel they belong to the city. However, as I said, this is changing, and it will change over time with their children and other generations.
What's the link between the very personal question about why don't everybody have the quality, but if I can focus on that, I think it's a bit about trust you. How do you find living in Valletta? So personally, not just trying to work, but so with that reasoning, the fact that I go to sleep in Valletta is good enough to make me living there. And I think that's what has definitely changed about whether you from Valletta or not. The thing is, it's permanent change, I think, I fear. It's probably not a good thing. But this sort of, pseudo-political social point of view by Alexei, which is like, understand that, we're proud, okay, which is very true. But again, I want you to feel it, to understand this. But the reality, I think, is we're probably half a generation away of that dying. Because the moment what's the word? Well, just as much as there have been whole sectors which have been planted into Valletta, there's a more natural process of people moving on. It's a bit like what happens in the bike, I want to do something like that difference between someone who is you know, of the place or of that religion, and someone got wired with them. No? With time, that distinction between the two groups dissipates, as I said. But I do think it's a bit what we were talking about before, about this tension between that community on the periphery and this sort of very national happening in the center of it, because the whole way we use that city has changed. I think that's really good. I remember one thing which has struck me a lot about this, and it's, to be honest, alienating from Valletta in a funny way, was the first time I went to Dubrovnik after the war. And when I went through this huge restoration process, and I had never seen it before, but this was a spanking clean, fully restored city. And it made me realize that that was the direction we were taking. You know, I don't know if anyone has been probably lately, the last 5-10 years. You know, it's a fully restored town. Incredibly clean, incredibly bright, obviously, because all your surfaces are fully restored. Nothing contemporary. This flow of what Elise referred to as the one visitors going in, almost like textile. It's almost like an entry street, and you were allowed to go in. There's a route to follow. You have your main street, looks incredibly like Valletta's main street. You can buy your mug with your I love the Dubrovnik thing on it, you know, and then you basically made to leave. And I suddenly remember, like, when I went through this, I said, oh my god, this is really funny, you know. Thankfully, we're a lot slower, we have probably got less money available. But if we don't, I remember actually something with you at one point, you know, we're talking about, so now we're going to install the walls, and then what? You know? And then you do the paving, and then you do the wiring, and then you're told, you know, that you can't have to go there, and even have something timber, and that really begins to sound logical, you know. Maybe we'll have the advantage of a much slower process, so maybe it won't happen like that. But I remember that did alienate me from my question, if you want to listen.
Alexei was saying, like you were saying about this like sort of non-belonging towards Valletta. But like even if you read any books, like for example, so like you were talking about this non-belonging towards Valletta, and you were saying how maybe because people just go visit for one day, they do not feel like any pride for it. No, because for example, even if you see like some folklore and everything, there was this point in time where, for example, like people used to go to Valletta and used to wear like a hat, used to wear the suit, used to wear all the best clothing, and that wasn't too very far in the past. And I remember my grandparents recounting this very same thought. So like, what happened between this point in time where everyone, like, you know, going to Valletta was something prestigious, like, as you mentioned, was a city for gentlemen, and nowadays, like, you know, I can go to a t-shirt and flip-flops and be accepted almost.
We have other places to go. It's just
obviously before there was also Valletta. So when you needed to go to this prestigious shop, you go to Valletta. High society was in Valletta. But today the reality changed. I mean, when you say they used the train, not everyone had a car. So today everything is much more accessible, everything is near. In fact, last week or the week before I was wondering how they managed to have the car before. But the truth is, going to Valletta was like an outing, like, I don't know, going to Kosovo. So it's not something accessible, at least it wasn't accessible as much as it is today. Today is much more accessible. I mean, just take the bus and you're there in 15 minutes. So.
Chris, I read one side what you were questioning. You finished by saying, what could we do for people to be happy in Valletta? I think first of all, happiness, as you know, is very subjective. Some people found themselves quite happy in slums. for example. You can be very happy in a very ugly house. Okay, if you're not someone who's looking for a particular aesthetic, of course. But I think happiness is also linked to, as you were saying, to belonging. How do we make people feel they belong and they are proud of Valletta or somewhere else? I think you might see it too much as something aesthetic. Because actually, good if you don't. We agree.
I think mostly top of the list would be safety.
Yeah, all right.
Safety doesn't only mean walking on a pavement and dribbling with it, or walking at night and the street is totally dark, or feeling safe around people who actually live next door to you, or the roof over your roof.
Exactly.
But safety, I think, is one of the top priorities to be happy.
Of course, I agree. In fact, before I was speaking about Jane Jacobs' work in New York, and she's really stresses how this zoning thing, the fact that a city is completely dead after even 6 o'clock. Touristic cities, I mean, think in Dina, when the tourist go leaves, there is no one, it's empty, it's dead. And it, not in Dina, because it might be too small, but in New York, for example, then it becomes really, it becomes a trap. You have much more crimes. Those nice, beautiful gardens at night when there is no one. But speaking about belonging to a city, I think it really can be summed up in this expression called, which says making the city, or making space, or appropriating. But now there are a lot of small organizations trying to make people appropriate their public spaces, their streets, making a day without cars, for example, or planting. Like some people, for example, have this kind of ideas from San Francisco. They pay for a parking space, a small car space, and they, for 2-3 hours, put a grass, a tree, a bench, and make it as a garden, a public garden. So, but what I think is that you start to feel that you belong to a city or a village where, when you start to use it, as you said, so you need safety, but you also need a lot of different activities, shopping, the 5 points actually, they're really good. So you start to belong to a city when you start to make friends, when you start creating emotional bondings, links. Not so much a city that you find beautiful. You will find it beautiful after, because you have a lot of nice memories, because you feel free, you feel safe. That's how you actually start to belong to it.
First of all, I would suggest Elise to study Valletta. But, okay, because I have a lot of unanswered questions. But when Chris was saying that safety is a big issue, and I agree with him. However, on the other hand, I think Valletta is a rather safe place. Notwithstanding this, I'm aware that a lot of people, unfortunately, have a wrong perception of Valletta. And I really don't understand where it came from, but it's a very common, wrong, or negative perspective of the city. Now, how it got generated, or whatever, I don't know, honestly, but maybe at least in the future we can study.
You've spoken about people that live there now, you've spoken about that maybe dying out in the future, maybe it will be a slow process. You've spoken about daytime, many people there, one-off. You've spoken about the night time. What about making an incentive to make, for example, me, I'm a young person, maybe I'd like to do that. It's a beautiful city, I perceive it that way. What about making something to make people influence and go live there? Is there anything we should be going to live in the village? Or in the city?
I think at the moment, to be honest, there isn't. And there have been a number of factors. I think Valletta has been marketed as a high-end place. And in fact, it's a very desirable place, but for high-end people or whatever. And that caused obviously the inflation or the ballooning of the prices in Valletta. And we've realized this in these past years. We've seen people purchasing property which is falling down. They leave it on the market for a couple of years and they manage to sell it at a higher price a few years later. So I think that's causing a big problem. I think one of the issues will be solved when government decides to start poking a little bit, that's the correct term, all those people that own a property in Valletta which is simply lying there and rotting. I think something should be done. I think it's very unfair that pardon?
The government is the biggest owner of properties which are falling.
I agree with you. I think something should be done. Because I think it's very unfair that a lot of money has been spent on restoration and stuff, and then you get all these properties falling apart all over Valletta. And, well, government should start from itself, but I think government is pumping a lot of money as well in restoration, which is a good thing. But I think there should be more incentives, especially for the private investors to... Yes.
I think part of the problem though is, and I'm not really thinking about Valletta per se, more about people that look at it from a wider sense. If safety is, say, one of the indicators that are important in terms of the quality of the environment we live in, probably a second one would be, my view, important one would be, what's the direction of flow in terms of mobility? Some people would call it the creative class. Is the creative class attracted to live in Malta or Valletta, or is it the other way around? Is it the creative class in Malta that is more directed towards moving out? I know you wanted to there's more later, and I think for me this is the key one. You could, if you want, to take your question, the person is saying, okay, let's use Valletta as a simple opposite in a sense. Is that interested in having good interest base?
I personally so. I'm in theatre, like you said, I like there's nothing, so after we finish theatre, I just go around. As a simple occupation, I have to work in one professor. I'm in theatre as well, so like at night, our days shift around in that period of time, so we have no go out of, I know one, no partner restaurants open, and it's very limited. As a student in architecture, we were sent to Valletta for sites and whatnot for sites. We're there all the time, so even when we have our talks in Valletta, it's a nice thing to be there in the city. So like, with my question when we had our talks in Alemannia, I was thinking like, what if us as students were like living in a city like this? Wouldn't it be nice to bring our life in there?
I know my concept is reversed though. That whoever takes, that I know that one. So there are pockets of an audience if you want to have them on. You know? I don't think anybody on the other side of the fence is ever questioning whether they stop being reactive and say, okay, look, can I change the flow here? You know, the flow up to now is in that direction. You can apply it on a national level. Where is the mobility in the last 10 years? It's about qualified, creative people, taking the opportunity from them and thinking that it's about moving out. But I don't see the reverse flow being supported, if you know what I mean. I think that's not there at the very, very end. And if we just leave it as a reactive force, the inevitable will happen. And I think this is what Valletta has taught us, like in history. It's something that's been allowed to happen. We don't really know why. I wouldn't be able to ask why it happened. So without going into the it's logical to think of a city like Valletta having a population of 35,000, but we will build enormous myths about population numbers of Valletta, you know. But my real worry is that we don't think about it. We just let it happen. Recently, there's document someone who might have seen it. Instead, the structural plan objective discussion. It's been set that discussion. I think it's something close to what we bring out now. Which talks about, for example, Malta effectively become a global city. No? crazy, it's like a giant old people's home. To me, that's what it's like. You know, it's fearful. I'm going to live in old people's home with lots of other old people, you know. And it's scary, I think, because these things don't just happen. I mean, they just happen, you measure them, you take them, you know. Sure, there should be someone at some point that says, okay, I think we do something about this, because this obviously means that, I suppose, we don't have this creative flow into the island. It's not dreaming, it's history, you know, it's the way it's always been, up to 20 decades ago. And I think it applies even when it's like this. You might be interested. The problem I think we have here is that we're reactive. The only thing that happens is some people put some property on the market, and then I speculate. No, we don't do it by something.
Going back on this of safety, and when I go to Valletta, you see all these people, sometimes even in the evening, which are very territorial. And those people, I think, in my opinion, they make Valletta because those are the people that say, this is my city, this is what I want to do in the city. And when Chris was saying about niche, as well before, people that niche to mark this territory, it's quite obvious even when you see people, I don't know, painting their house, and it's connected to another house, but they still paint there, so to say, this is mine. I don't think that's a bad thing, but that is what people talk about, even when we hear people say, Valletta is dangerous. But why is Valletta dangerous? Because you go there and you find all these people wearing these chains. I don't see it as dangerous, but that is what people see. And I think Valletta shouldn't lose these people, because if Valletta loses these people, it wouldn't, these people are made Valletta, in my opinion, and that's it, because I think if you don't have these people in there, the city wouldn't be a city anymore. It would be an open place for everyone to go in and go out in the evening and no one would remain there.
I agree with you. I mean, I haven't seen all these people with gyms, but there are. However, what I think we should do is to channel their energies and organize ourselves. That's why before I mentioned as well the issue of synergies, because I think we lack a lot of synergies. So there's a lot of territorialism. Chris mentioned it, and it exists, and we're trying to break it and create synergies. For example, one of the things which we recently created, which is I think it's the first time that ever happened in Malta. So we created a committee of Festa people, right? So essentially we're the only locality, as far as I know, that we have a committee made up of the 4 major feasts in Valletta, and we're getting them together in order to share their resources and collaborate together. So I think it was a very good, a huge achievement considering the territorialism which exists in the city. However, as I said, there's a lot of goodwill, a lot of potential, and we have to direct that potential for creating better or more good for the city.
I just want to ask, because recently also was Virtual Street being pedestrianized. And when you say like really, because in a way that's up to the point, it was a mission itself, having public street being pedestrianized. Was there an impact on the community, like as a resident of Valletta, and also the same for the shops? Was there more commerce in the city? What was the impact in general?
Well, I think the impact which there is the creation of space. We're very limited on space, especially pedestrian space. I think David mentioned it, that practically people have, or children have nowhere where to play. I mean, you can't be in the streets nowadays. So I think the creation of those spaces. Even, for example, St. George's Square. In the evening, it tends to be filled with people, children, playing in the fountains and that stuff. So I think that was a positive from more social aspect. Maybe from a commercial aspect, I don't think we've exploited that potential enough, to be honest. You still find the shops who object and say that before they were serviced better, because obviously everyone would simply park in front of their shop and go and buy from that shop. However, it's changing mentality. I think we're not used to pedestrianization or the concept of it. As I said, I don't think we've exploited it enough, so we have to exploit the benefits of pedestrianization. And a negative aspect, which I see, is obviously access. We have a big problem of access with regards to traffic and cars in Valletta. So obviously, taking a street for pedestrianization reduces the access. However, on the whole, I think it's a positive thing, and the fact that we have a larger city center, I think it's beneficial for the city.
So, Elaine and myself have prepared a lot of topics and kind of questions for the panel here. But I think it's very good what has been happening, that it's becoming really spontaneous, because we introduced a lot of questions in the case that it wasn't going to go. But maybe we can go quickly through a few aspects of the PowerPoint, and maybe then we can generate more questions from the public, or maybe some people of the panel want to interact with. Because what is remaining is in any case going to be too much to go through, or we're going to be stuck here all night. Well, this person is the person we were bringing forward, which is Cameron Sinclair, which you can go, I think, to the next slides already. And yeah, obviously, we've been talking about it before with the panel, maybe a little bit over-focused on Valletta, but yeah, the role of an architect is political. And that's also one of the things, I don't know, like today in your curriculum, when you are studying architecture, do you think there's enough topics that make you realize about this political role? If you maybe go to the next slide. I don't think for the next one. No, it's not in there. But also the same one, Cameron Sinclair also said like that. So by the time I went to architecture school, I was taken aback when I realized that I was being taught about how to become the next Frank Gehry, the star architect. It was all about image, form, and aesthetics, not at all about the social issues that I wanted to address. How's the feeling of students today? Because obviously this Cameron guy was a previous generation. Do you think social topics are considered enough when you study? Not at all.
I think a number of us don't know what's going on. I mean, I remember myself first year, second year, I definitely didn't know the little political issues that were happening in our field. Now that I've grown up, maybe I take more of an interest, but it's not brought up in classrooms or discussions between us.
I think that there's a lack of knowledge in construction, for example. And a lot of this kind of architecture as well comes through building with your hands, I would say. And one thing I think is lacking from our education is how to build something yourself and just do it, and be a doer. And when the opportunity arises, you can just go for it without needing a team of 20 people. In my case, that's what I would say.
Personally, it's the lack of I don't really exposed to the politics of the situation. That once you leave, once you see actually building on the island, you can actually say it was designed according to certain policies. Everything that we're seeing around us is exactly many policies. And that a lot of students leaving with don't really understand how those policies are really morphing our designs. and then maybe understanding how to make use of them or just always write them all the time.
I don't think the university course actually wants to encourage us to even think about these things. With my tutors, never ever talk about these things. They're more about does it function structurally, does it replicate? If I were to bring it up, it would be shrugged off as not that important. So if I'm not encouraged, inevitably I start thinking about it.
I would say keep on fighting. No, but also, I've been here for a while, but I'm at the same time a bit of an outsider in Malta. I always felt that when a person like this means acting politically in Malta, because politics is literally so close, and politics is always about parties, and it's always about choosing a camp. I think that might be problematic when it means acting politically. It probably means like taking your stance in society, which means about a lot of social issues, you know. Maybe it's about like over-attention on Valletta, and maybe interesting things could be building areas like Taparis in the Ficara, because I think that is a real challenge, you know, to put a building down over there that makes a mark. So that was my observation. I don't know if the panel has something to add to it.
I always get a bit edgy when this thing about politics comes in. To you, I say, good for you, and that's what you should be doing. You should be seeing how you're going to design your buildings well, and you're going to have, you're going to get into these topics. So don't worry about it. And I think talking politically in a good sense, let's not get too rich, because at the end of the day, architecture is a product that is bought. And if you look through history, if you look today, we speak about social issues, very good. But at the end of the day, somebody pays for a building. It takes two important people to create a building or an environment. And that's the client and the architect. You can't do without the client. You can do without the architect, and that you can have another architect. So let's not get too rich, and let's not think that the architects are the ones who originate the politics or the social consciousness. I think if Louis XV, that said, I want to build Versailles, and I want it all in gold, and I want my big super fountain. If the architect came and said, okay, maybe we should have a couple of thousand buildings for the little people, I don't think he's accepted. So, it starts as basic as that. And if Corbusier was told, I want to design this because I don't want the people to have an identity, then he went ahead and did that. Now things are changing, and obviously people with the money, and that's government, are realizing that they cannot do the same. And they have to put money into things which will keep them popular. And again, so it's as basic as that. And therefore the social issues come in, and the architect responds to this. So when Cameron Sinclair said the role of the architect is political, it's political in the sense that the role of the architect is not political per se. The role of the architect is a matter of perception. Yes, so I have a good way of perceiving things, I can have a bad way. If the role of the artist is political, I could be influenced by good political thought, I could be influenced by bad political thought. And at the end of the day, that's going to depend, I think, very much on the client. We're all aware, I think we're all aware of what the issues are. And at the end of the day, you're asked to deliver a product, and if your client is going to have good social values, your business is to reflect it. I think that's a very hard reality, unfortunately.
Yes, I understand that the architect has very little leeway, that the client is dictating almost to you. But I don't think the architect is only a technician, or at least I think many architects are fed up to be only technicians, and they would like to be more creative. About social issues, I think
the architect, say the well-trained architect, could help the client also solve out some problems he has, or give different solutions with the client. That's what the client is expecting from the architect, I guess, as well. But the client doesn't know how to build a building that will trigger, I don't know, that will trigger diversity, that will trigger activity, you know. So the architect can still propose something, and it's not so much about perception, good or bad perception, it's also about uses, about how you use this building and the space. So again, it's not so much aesthetic, it's also, it's aesthetic and political in the very wide sense.
It's not, can you go back on the block safety unit? No, this one?
No, that's a prime site. The penthouse there was sold for about 1.5 million over these pounds. The contractor, I mean, it's not always, we're talking about the architect that really designed it, like real safety and so on, really going to spending time to give the client something really different. The client there, which eventually will build that space in between, doesn't want design. Because if you go to an architect who will just copy-paste that, he's going to pay to sell that property, save the same amount of money. So the contractor really, in the end, as Adrian is saying, is the one who, I mean, Vivaldi came. I go to the architect who made my piece block, I apply, but will sell it anyway, it's design or so most of the time, it's decided by it.
Sorry, students, for taking over. I just wanted to say that, as Adrian was saying, sometimes, you know, buildings get built and then you get attacked on all the bad things, and nobody appreciates all the not little fights, quite big fights you manage to fought and to persuade clients not to do this way but another way, and in the end these end up being criticized anyway. And I always feel like writing the original brief and then say, but this is what we managed to, you know, make them not do. But it's always at the end you work in a very tight framework of how much you want to, how much you can change clients' minds. And luckily I left that world now, and as a lecturer now I have to defend it because I think it's more than political, it's social responsibility that I try to tell students. Social responsibility from providing comfort within the space that somebody needs to have. I don't believe in luxury if you need to roll a gas heater from room to room just because it's marble floor. But teaching first year, I think the biggest challenge is always unlearning them from that, what they see around, and starting from scratch and instigating this, since they're going to be periti, social responsibility, both aesthetical but also from inside, also sustainability, because I think the design fails if it's not sustainable, or all the fancy of the word. But I think we really need to start thinking how to design comfortable spaces and not aesthetically amazing spaces.
Please, you still want to have a word?
I don't know if we can go back to the slide of singularity. It's really funny that the last bit actually mentions the fact that they have that an architect's role in a social sense perhaps is that they are closely relating to the community and also to the agencies that hold them together. Well, my the students I am tutoring at the moment, the 4th years, actually have this really sweet project with the Victoria Lines. And they're actually having a site whereby there is this guy who basically is a squatter outside, and they're being told by the tutors that the squatter should be kept there. Fancy, they should design an apartment for him with the view. And they actually met the squatter, they actually met their clients who are the Landlords Association, and they're actually meeting a lot of people from the community. So I think in that sense, the students in general have a very good understanding of what are the social implications of the designs and of the projects. On the other hand, the first part of the quote is talking about the political. And I think you guys, the students, I'm talking to you now, you are much more politically trained than you think. Because in your 5 years at university, you have to make sure that this tutor knows what you're doing and is happy, and make sure that the other tutor knows, and the partner knows and is happy. And in fact, a lot of people usually tend to have more push control, but you have the trends, no? You have the people just take different tutors, or let's say people who inspire them in the course, and they have to politically, make sure that everyone is happy and they know that they are in between because they pass for your exams and your degree. So in that sense, you are very politically well trained, in my opinion, from what I see. And to close off my argument, and I think this is what I try to inspire in my students, is that you should always know your parameters very, very well. And your parameters is all you have, because be it a site, or an economic situation, or an apartment, the parameters are what counts, actually. And if you truly believe in what you're doing and what you're studying to achieve, and knowing your parameters, I think that's when success, quality of life, happiness, safety can be achieved.
Thank you, Chris. I just want to say something. I think there should be more space for the students, so I don't want to let go of that. I just want to say, we can't avoid the political role that we have. I mean, everything that we do in architecture has such an impact that it's really impossible not to become political. I mean, so we really, we need to become political, we need to be aware of your responsibilities, your social responsibilities to society, both the existing and future society, and to the environment. And so, you have a political role, you have to fulfill it, and I think you should be encouraged to go through it. So, up to you. I think you need to become more aware of what's going on. Thank you, Alberto. Yeah, I'm going to ask, maybe because we've been going for quite a while, ask if there's any closing elements the panel wants to get back to, because we've been sharing a few themes beforehand with them. If there's anything that from the themes that we might not have been able to handle, or any other sort of last reflections you want to give on the panel, then I'll pass on the microphone to you.
Actually, like to the last point, I think because Cameron Sinclair is so political, sometimes a very big fee, is why it can afford to be aspirational. I think that's the big legacy of the work he's doing. Okay, it's the product of this type of economy, so it's sort of what he has been doing, It's also the product of being able to attract money for the application of the corporate social responsibility to architecture and to its quality. But I think key to it is aspiration, By the way, another guy who's not an architect, but I don't know about it at all, but thinking is close to the debate. But remember the time that there was this big debate about the St. John's project and the Underground project, or whatever debate it was, but I remember same discussion about having a big parking area in the square, and then a big discussion about the parliament, and then about this and about that. And suddenly I got these visions of, it's total upheaval in this really small area, and it's really about pressure. And I said, where's that pressure coming from? Why there are a lot of things we the other side don't have, and we try to put them in this really small space. And I was thinking, surely it's not just about Valletta, no? And we don't live there, even though only 5,000 or 6,000 of us do. And I remember thinking, and where do we live? We don't live there. Are we happy with the place that we live? And I remember going through some pictures, and I came across, and no offense to anyone, but a picture, an area shot of Gura, and an area shot of Shaka. And I was looking at it, I was thinking, this is really dense, These are, you've got the same view inside, I mean, a lot worse than that. It's like, these are the places where we live. So somehow, we built up this comfort zone, of the Valletta or the which also means the one. But the reality isn't that at all. So if happiness is an important yardstick, I begin to wonder, because I look at it and I say, what if you wake up tomorrow morning and just look out the window and say, my God, this place is really horrible, I shouldn't be living here. So I think that as architects, surely then that comes to the fore, and it must be about aspiration, obviously. Yes, of course, the client factors, the money factors is about driving down to the detail, but I think if architects don't start from that point of view, that platform where, I will aspire to make a difference. Okay, now I need to make myself skilled enough to be able to do that. But if we don't start off with that, it's about, what's my part going to be in working on the quality of that environment? Then I think it all caves in. I suspect some of what has happened in Malta recently, I fear. We look at things and we say, we just don't like anything anymore. Whatever anyone does, just look at it and say, this is horrible, I don't want it to happen. I just don't want anything anymore to happen. And I think we have to break out of that by the inspiration of something repetitive.
And I would say this ties in with the next part of the discussion, which obviously having a good building, or a building which, as Irina was saying before, functions properly, will make people happy. And here I want to ask Elise, what would you refer to as a bad building from an anthropologist's point of view? What makes a building bad and what makes it good, perhaps?
Can I just say to what David was saying about where we live, and last semester our brief was the regeneration of a streetscape, and we have to find our own site. So we are 5 groups, and all these 5 groups went around Malta to see which streetscape they were going to regenerate. When we were going around, the amount of streets that we found, we were spoiled for choice. I mean, Gura was one of the places we went, and literally took photos of every street and said, this is not the place we're going to tap. But we realized that there was a problem. The people don't see that there is a problem, and Irina said it before, when we come into the architecture faculty, there are people who have to be told that there is a problem. They don't realize that this density situation is happening. I don't know, that's the feeling I have. The people of Gura seem very happy to be living there. And if anything, they seem to want to take more land and build it up, not solve a problem. For them, there is no problem.
Okay, let me put it this way. Because actually, I remember looking at this about 10 times, something honest. It has made me wonder. I wonder what we think we look like. And although I'm sure you've maybe supposed to be studying or something, and then go from one thing to another. And I remember thinking, I wonder what gathering the MTA has. And I went to the gallery, of course, is the MBA's website. This is what people see ourselves to be. This is what I want, where I want to project myself to the world, you know. And the first photograph is what the sky got was this incredible blue sky, this incredible luscious green valley, with this stream of water. Because of the way the picture was taken, it looked quite nice. I said, think, where is this place? I've never been there, you know. And I was wondering, you know, being some Belgian in December, trying to decide where to spend a week of holiday to get away from. And thinking, my God, I was thinking about that guy in the beginning of the I was thinking he would do enough to sit for a bit, you know. I think it's a bit of a lack of identity, to be honest. I don't want to complicate it, but I really sometimes think that we've never really been, as a population, to the same side about working out our identity. The last 50 years have been so fast. And now we sort of skip that completely. And we're in this sort of vacuum where we just want to be like others, and we want to be a bit European, not so hard, with money, giving lots of other people. You know what I mean? I'm not so sure it's like that. I think the relativity in it becomes very powerful. So if you tell me that somebody who lives in that type of environment, specific to the town, I say, I hear relativity has really come in and we begin to not recognize it. Because it just not means nobody.
That taps into the last thing we had planned for tonight. And maybe that could be the start for a follow-up discussion a few months from now. However, we had promised this very busy panel that we would finish by 8 o'clock, so we went way beyond that. And I think some of us will stick around and have a drink, and maybe we can do it in have a chat with a drink. I want to thank first and foremost Elaine, SACES, you the crowd, and also the fantastic panel, Elise, David, Alexei, and Adrian. Thank you very much.